Good evening, dear friends. I did not want to be silent at a time when so many voices are being silenced. And the Ukrainian crisis, which has the danger of becoming a global crisis. Certainly it is symptomatic of global problems. I speak tonight on behalf of my friends and my students at the Rheinische Fachhochschule who asked me to state my position. I will try to say something quickly. I hope that I can always be of service to my friends and all others around the world who dream of and fight for, if only in their hearts, a better, friendlier world. A world in which we can openly debate about our interests, be taken seriously, and be heard. I just spoke to one of my exceptional students tonight, and he said something which spoke directly to my heart, but I fear that I may fail his correct standard. He said that the media principally is trying to separate us, and I hope I don't add fuel to the flame of separation with this video tonight. Let me now say something about the issue. Ask the question, is Putin a devil? Since 2014 until 2022, according to UNICEF, some 13,000 civilians have been killed. I ask you, during this period of 2014 until 2022, how many of you have heard about these 13,000 civilians, Ukrainian civilians? How many of you have seen pictures in the mass media or videos about their deaths, these Ukrainians? Personally, I never heard about any of them. In fact, I had now only found out by actively searching to find out what the situation was before Putin has started the war in 2022. As I write this, according to the United Nations, some 102 civilians have been killed since Putin started the war last week. It is strange that we see this all over the newspaper, this 100 civilians, and yet we never saw the 13,000 who died before Putin started the war. I ask, why did no one talk about the 13,000 Ukrainians? Why were the newspapers silent about 10,000 and now so loud about 100? What makes the 100 Ukrainian civilians different from the 13,000 Ukrainians which were killed before? Perhaps we will see that, similar to the cases of Palestine, Iraq, Libya, Syria, and other destroyed places, actually it seems that the question of who and how many civilians are being killed is not actually the key thing which gets something in the press. Actually, it's not really important who or how many are killed, but rather what is important is who is doing the killing. If a civilian is killed by an approved organization like NATO or the USA or the CIA, then it is okay, and there's no problem, and there's nothing need to be in the news about it. But no one else is allowed to behave like that. The commercial press does not care about the death of civilians, but rather it cares about who is doing the killing. Putin is a devil because his orders haven't come from Washington. But rather, it is my opinion that the action that is now taking place was necessary to stop the war, the Ukrainian war, because this war in Ukraine started in 2014, not just last week. It was a covert war in Ukraine to build up a secret ISIS-like organization within Europe called Azov, a Nazi organization which has been given since 2014 some $40 billion by the USA for the sole purpose of dividing Ukraine and thus dividing the EU and Russia. And the longer we allowed this Azov to grow in its covert, hidden manner inside Ukraine, the longer we let it grow, the more civilian lives it would have cost to stop it eventually. So, the faster it was stopped, the better. It is clear that it could only have been stopped by military intervention. Someone had to stop the growth of an ISIS-like organization within the heart of Europe. But who could do it? Who would do it? Actually, the devil Putin has been the only one who has had the courage to stop this covert US operation to create a European ISIS within the heart of Europe. In 2007, 68% of German citizens voted against the eastward expansion of NATO. Where are those Germans today? Now today they all pretend to side with Washington. Not very plausible. Perhaps they don't have any idea, these Germans, of what is actually happening. And the chances of them finding out are getting smaller and smaller as the media in EU is being illegally shut down. Now, to move to some more practical matters that touch us, our friends, our family, an issue which positions us in the events. I must say that people like myself, and probably you who are viewing this, my friends, we are not rich. We are mere citizens. We are workers. We do not have much time or energy to get behind every trick played on us, to discover the cause of the things happening, the things which are shaping history around us, the things which we ourselves are thrown into. So I do not judge the opinions of my fellow citizens. I don't look down on them if they disagree with me or they don't have any idea what's going on in the world around them. How can I judge them when every one of us is just fighting to just survive? On top of that, we have to admit that the architects of propaganda in our world are genius. It often takes more than intelligence, more than expertise. Sometimes it takes even more than genius to see through the tricks played on us by the professional propagandists employed by the enemies of democracy. Indeed, even a PhD provides no assurance that one is above being brainwashed by the most banal of propaganda campaigns. We normal people, we citizens, we workers, we don't have the time to fight the battle of propaganda and the mind games. Most of our jobs already expect 100%, 110% of our time, our energy, our imagination, our creativity, leaving us nothing even for our families and friends, and nothing for ourselves. And finally, we have even less energy, time for participation in building a fairer, better world. Therefore, I sympathize with us, the modern citizen. We have all felt at one time or the other, I don't want to earn a living, I want to live my life. I ask you, how can practical democracy grow when the citizen feels like this? Is this not the reason why we are stuck in these terrible events? True democracy can only grow from citizens themselves. But if the citizens are not healthy, if the citizens are not free, if the citizens have no time, no energy, no resources to find out the tricks which are being played on them, then is there any hope for democracy? Until the citizens can rule their own lives, there can be no democracy wherein the rule of the state emerges from the autonomy of its citizens. I have often been guilty of asking too much of my students and family. Please forgive me for that. I know it is hard to give energy to build a better world when one doesn't even have the energy or the time to sleep a good night's sleep, or even a moment to watch a sunset, or even a moment for a simple prayer. Because we are so out of breath just trying to keep a respectable identity in industry and avoid falling into disaster. There is no democracy, though, where citizens have no resources to participate in rule. We cannot have a sovereign democracy until we, citizens, are sovereign, until the citizens have quality time and quality resources, and above all, quality information. Which brings me back to the current events. Today, the EU Commission has eliminated free journalism in the EU by blocking RT and Sputnik. Without referendum, without legal basis, they have blocked these news agencies. For example, if one looks on YouTube for RT, one just simply gets a blank screen which says not available in your country. Is it not enough that the citizens have little time to inform themselves at all, but in addition, they have the information limited to them, censored by the so-called democratic powers who criticize the non-democracy of other nations. Now, let me say what I think is the most ironic aspect of our media and our governments blocking our information sources. The same interests who are blocking RT, for example, are the same interests which systematically set up journalist teams throughout the world, teams which hide their identity and hide their funding and pretend even to represent the voice of foreign populations, and for the most nefarious of goals, such as stirring up ethnic hatred, rebellion, or civil war. Let me give one example, one such well-documented case in Syria, which is relatively recent history. Actually, Syrian refugees are still freezing on the borders of Poland, even as I speak, partly as a result of what I'm saying here. The CIA set up a television station which presented itself as a Syrian television organization claiming to represent the voice of Syrian people. In truth, these news programs were completely filmed in London, being covertly paid for by the CIA. And according to a US State Department document leaked to WikiLeaks, this fake Syrian voice was set up explicitly for the purpose of increasing ethnic tensions between the Sunni and Shia. In short, those who pay for news agencies which pretend to be the voice of foreign citizens, explicitly inciting for civil war in that foreign nation, those same interests are blocking us from watching the news of journalists who openly tell us who they are, what interests they represent, and who funds them. Let me ask you, could it be any more transparent who the news organization Russia Today represents? Russia, perhaps? Compare that with the fake Syrian news organization funded covertly by the CIA for the purpose of causing civil war. What was its name? Would it have been called CIA Today? I don't think so. I don't think many Syrians would have watched it if its name had been at all transparent. Of course, this is all very strange and counter to intuition and counter to democracy. And the most horrible fact I can think of, the extreme extent of the hypocrisy that we have to live with is, for example, the greatest modern journalist, Julian Assange, the man who showed us that we are being spied on by world governments, showed us that there is systematic, institutionalized torture of people in Iraq and in Guantanamo Bay and stuff. Julian Assange, who showed us these things, now rots in solitary confinement in a prison in London. Solitary confinement, which amounts to psychological torture, in the same city where the fake voice of the Syrian people, which stirred up the Syrian civil war, had been covertly filmed. It is sad, but we should not be surprised. Did Putin ban European journalists in Ukraine or Russia? Deutsche Welle has only been banned after the EU illegally banned RT. Is Russia against foreign journalists? Quite the opposite. His press secretary has been begging foreign journalists for years to cover the violence in eastern Ukraine, to see the death of the 13,000 who have never appeared in our newspapers. Where was Deutsche Welle then, when the war began? All this reminds us just too much like other cases in the world, cases which are even more alarming than the Ukrainian crisis, cases like Palestine, Myanmar, Iraq, Libya, Syria, Yemen, Sudan, etc., etc. There is something deep going on here. I repeat one fact before I leave you guys tonight. In 2007, 68% of Germans agreed that NATO should not expand eastward. Did NATO stop its expansion? Is NATO democratic? Is NATO not aggressive? These questions are only the tip of the iceberg. The situation is anything but black and white, but there is a clear morality beneath the complexity, if one only has the courage to search for it. A famous German activist once was asked, Do you really think that you can change the world with your tiny axe? She responded, that is a bullshit question. Rather, I ask you, do you really think that we have the option to do nothing? I hope that we do not do nothing, blindly following the dominant powers and social fashion is only easy in the short run, but eventually our own humanity and dignity will be the price for cowardice and ignorance. So I wish you all a good evening and good luck to everyone. Prayers and hope from your friend here in Düsseldorf, Germany. Good night.